We are riding the Strasburg line in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. As you can see, we are on a period-correct train. And what period? Well, late 1800s, early 1900s approximately. So you're seeing a lot of wood paneling, ornate window furniture. I'm sitting in probably the most comfortable train seat I can imagine ever to be sitting on. I have a ceiling fan above my head. My personal journey through this history has been really something. You know, we were in the Massachusetts region exploring the Industrial Revolution in America and how that built the factories, that created the watches, that created the American sensibility of manufacturing. But to be on this train, you really get a sense of how travel and transcontinental railroads and the need to standardize time push that ideal forward. Here we are in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Much like Boston, it's one of the most historically significant locations for the American watch industry. And we can know that to one place specifically, the Hamilton Watch Company. Hamilton holds a special place in the history and culture of Lancaster. Founded in 1892, the company quickly became a major employer in the region, producing high-quality timepieces that were sought after by consumers worldwide. The original building was extensively renovated and restored, preserving many of its historic features, such as the clock tower and the original facade. So I made my way over there to check it out. Thanks for meeting us today.
It's my pleasure.
It's really nice to meet you.
No, it's so good to have you guys here.
All right, so Paul Miller, you are the facilities manager here at the Clock Tower Apartments, which famously was once the Hamilton Watch Factory.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, this is my first time seeing this place with my own eyes. You know, I write about watches, I read about watches, I live and breathe watches, but to see this place, you know, well, it's amazing.
You're gonna love it. We have some interesting things to show you here. There's an east and a west clock tower.
Okay.
This is the east, and the west is there, of course.
Yep.
And we'll go up there. I'd like to take you guys. If
we would love to go up there.
You will go up there with me?
Yeah, I'd love to go up there with you.
Great. Great. Just follow me, kind of where I go, watch your steps.
Okay.
It's all safe, all is well.
I trust you, Paul.
Look at this. Is this not cool?
It is very cool.
I mean, you can see for miles and miles and miles.
So when you set daylight savings, you go up this ladder?
Yep. This is a ladder that's at least 100 years old.
So you climb a 100-year-old ladder to reset the clock.
And we're going to do it today. You guys are going to do it too. Let's go.
One of the few places working to preserve the heritage of the American watch industry is the National Watch and Clock Museum, also known as the NAWCC. It's just down the road in Columbia, Pennsylvania, and it's a unique and fascinating destination for clock and watch enthusiasts. The museum features an extensive collection of timepieces that spans across centuries and continents, showcasing the evolution of timekeeping technology. I met up with the curators John and Rory to learn a bit more.
Everybody should know that this started out as a collectors organization. It started out as a watch collectors getting together and deciding they needed an organization. More people wanted to join. A lot of what we have are donations from members. So it's a members organization was sort of first that decided to put a lot of knowledge and items together, and now we have this great museum.
What we're doing right now is trying at least our best to track the story of American watchmaking, the history of American watchmaking. And I'd like to know what the perspective is of American watches, historically speaking, and how that's sort of illustrated in the museum now.
So with Pennsylvania, particularly Lancaster County, there's a significant horological heritage here. And being in such an environment naturally sets us up to be the repository for information, collected artifacts from those industries. And of course, the most significant giant of the industry was the Hamilton Watch Company.
What makes a fine watch fine? There are many things. First, the name and reputation of the company. And that is important, because a good name and respect.
Hamilton's success helped to shape the economic and social landscape of Lancaster, as it supported local businesses and provided thousands of jobs for area residents. Over the years, Hamilton watches have been worn by everyone from military personnel and movie stars to astronauts and presidents. But when we take a look back at the history of Hamilton, one of the major critical components was that of the railroad system in America during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. With the advent of the railroad, it became necessary and essential to have a reliable and accurate method of keeping the time across vast distances.
During this golden age, and back a little further into the late 1800s, we saw a shift into the need to keep the railroads on time.
Sure. Even as late as the early 1880s, there were 40 or 50 different standards on railroad companies all over the country. So it became increasingly important as railroads got busier and busier, and the territories that they were operating under became bigger and bigger, to come up with some standards. And officially on November 18th, 1883, the day of two noons, at noontime on the Eastern Meridian, they set their clocks accordingly. And from that point forward, the railroads really did set the standard for the creation of what we consider today to be time zones.
There would be watch inspectors who were at jewelry shops, watchmakers who were responsible for making sure that each railroad guy's watch ran and was set to the right time. The railroad guy wasn't really allowed to set his own watch. It was supposed to be an accurate watch that was set and left. And it also wasn't pendant set, so that it couldn't accidentally pull out the pendant and reset the watch. Wow. It was very necessary that a guy on a train knew the right time, went through the switches at the right time, and didn't crash into other trains that were supposed to be there at that time. Making good standard railroad watches was a really important thing and a big moneymaker for developing American industry. We picked out three very special watches here, and so we have here for you Hamilton serials number 1 and serial number 2. You can look at number 1 and see that it's just pristine. We have all of the records that show when these were built and when they were sold, and this was never sold. It was put into the safe. It remains in its pristine, first day out of the factory condition. You can see serial number 1 and just that pristine, beautiful Hamilton damascening. Its sibling number 2 was one of the first couple of watches sold. It got sold to a jeweler in upstate New York and went to the ownership of a railroad man, and you can tell that it may have been loved, but it's been cleaned a lot. It's a completely different look. This was a working watch. In 1940, Hamilton ended up buying this watch back from the railroad man, giving him another railroad watch. Hamilton gained quite a reputation really quickly, and everybody, American explorers and everything, wanted to use their watches. This watch, with a beautiful radium, probably a hot radium dial, no problem there.
No,
Danny.
no problem.
Was
I'm not afraid.
Commissioned by the Admiral Byrd expedition to the South Pole.
Wow.
It's got an engraving of the Byrd ship on there and the name of the fellow who owned it on the Byrd expedition, and Hamilton supplied those watches. It was a very prestigious thing for them.
We're so close to Lancaster here, it'd be great to understand a little more about the watchmaking history of where we are and why these are significant.
Well, one of the ones that comes to my mind as being significant to the local area is the watch by Ezra Bowman in the case there. The Bowman jewelry store still exists. It's empty, but it was a center of training, both in jewelry and in watchmaking. And today, when you go out and meet people in the industry who are running their own micro brands, or a lot of them will have had their training at the Bowman schools. So locally, it's part of the lifeblood of horology in Lancaster.
Here we are in Mount Joy, Pennsylvania today, outside the workshop of RGM. RGM, of course, stands for the name of one Roland G. Murphy. He is what many consider to be one of the last vestiges of true American watchmaking today, if not in the country itself, at least in the Northeast. And we are so excited to get inside and see what he's up to, what he's making, and just get a first-hand look at all the great watches inside. Let's check it out.
I was always very mechanical, like to do things with my hands, like to build things, make things. And in my senior year, I got a job half a day working in a clock company down in Maryland. It used to be called the Danaker Clock Company. So in my basement, I cut a hole in a table and I put a grandfather clock movement on it. I could put some braces under it, put the weights under the table, and I could kind of figure out how the parts were interacting in this movement. And then one day I decided to take one apart, put it back together. It still worked, So I was very interested in that. So a friend of ours said, you know what, if you like clocks and all, you should go up to Bowman Technical School, which is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. At the time, I was born and raised in Maryland. So I came to Lancaster. I went to school at Bowman's mainly for clockmaking. They had clockmaking, watchmaking, hand engraving, jewelry making. And in the clock course, because some small carriage clocks have like watch escapements and platform escapements in it, they also taught us to repair pocket watches. And we were making staffs and components and parts and turning on the lathe. I realized I actually preferred watches. This is the Edward Howard model. E. Howard was, at one point, was sold to the Keystone Watch Case Company. And then they decided to make a super high-end top model called the Edward Howard. And that's what this model is here. And we use this watch design as the bridge inspiration for our caliber 801. So we can see here that the bridge shapes are very similar. Wow. So this was the inspiration. And the reason we did is I wanted a movement that was very classic looking and was very much inspired by an American design. Other inspirations, there's numerous ones, but I'll just share a few things. 801 Corps of Engineer watch, very popular model for us, has our 801 movement, has a real fired enamel dial. We call it the Corps of Engineer because it's inspired by the World War I Corps of Engineer pocket watches. And I have one right here. Wow. So if you look at you can see clearly the inspiration behind this. So this is something I'd wanted to do for years, but I wasn't going to do it until we could find someone that could make real enamel dials for us. This is a Rose engine. It's also called an engine turning machine or a guilloche machine. This particular machine is a plant. It was made in England. This one we think maybe around the 1930s. We have 5 machines in our shop here. The dial we're turning here today is for one of our model 207s. This is a 35 millimeter watch with a hand-cut guilloche dial with a galvanic blue plating on it. Now this is built around a Swiss movement where of course the 801 is our own movement, but we're still doing the same kind of handmade work for the dials.
What does it mean to you to put Lancaster, Pennsylvania on the watches? Because so many people are used to seeing Swiss made everywhere. And I think that sort of the death of the American watch industry, made in the USA or made in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, you never see it. And I'm wondering what that means to you to be able to put that on a watch and truly mean it.
Well, I look at it as we're continuing the rich history from Lancaster County and from Lancaster of watchmaking. A lot of people don't realize how many watch companies were actually in Lancaster. We started with Adams and Perry, Lancaster Watch Company, Keystone Watch Company, Hamilton Watch Company. Bowman made 50 high-grade watches, E.F. Bowman, and then Dudley, and now us.
Roland is a key figure in the ongoing revitalization of the American watch industry. He continues to have a deep passion for traditional watchmaking techniques and a commitment to preserving the craft.
This is our Model 101M. It's the first model that we made here at RGM. It's an 18 karat gold case, solid silver engine turn dial, blued steel hands, chronograph, full calendar, 24-hour indication. So that's the watch that started it all, right there.
What is your point of view as a collector? What kind of watches are you looking for?
I mainly collect vintage and antique watches. I have several hundred watches. I enjoy quality, historical pieces, low serial numbers. There's no pattern to it. Like, you know, some people, I collect GMTs, or I don't really have a pattern, just anything I think is a bit historically interesting. The old American watches, they were the first companies to make interchangeable parts for watch movements before anybody else in the world was. You know, even the Swiss came over to one of the fairs to see how they were doing it, because they set up a demonstration line of how they were making parts at the fair, because, you know, at that point in Switzerland, you know, pretty much everything was hand fit, you know, so you couldn't take a center bridge from one watch and put it on another one and have it work. But Waltham could. You could take a bridge and put it on that one and everything was still working. So that interchangeability was a big part of the industrializing of watchmaking. And it's kind of, I think what made those companies great is also kind of what contributed to killing them.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what is your point on that.
And I honestly believe that, because they did everything in-house. So they were large companies. At the time, you didn't have computers and things, so you needed many machines just to make one bridge, where nowadays we can just have a few. So the operations had to be very large if you were going to do everything. And Waltham, Elgin, you know, later Hamilton, a number of others did it that way. And as long as the sales were there and things were doing well, then everything would work. But as soon as things would dip, then you'd have a problem. Where in Switzerland, it was more of a cottage industry. So if they needed to scale back, well, you just don't buy as many as this and as many as that, so you could scale it down. I think in the 30s, during the Depression, Audemars Piguet was down to less than 10 people.
Oh my goodness.
But they stayed alive, you know what I mean? Where I think when we got into World War II, Elgin, Hamilton, Waltham were all doing really well because the government was giving them tons of work. But what happened is they exited from the retail market because they had to do all this government work. So then a lot of Swiss brands that didn't have a foothold here could kind of come into the US market.
Hamilton's reliable pieces were used by American soldiers, pilots, and sailors, helping them coordinate their movements and operations with precision.
A really significant part of the Hamilton story, and that is their contribution to navigational technology during World War II. Enormous numbers of Hamilton 21s, 22s were sent out to Europe for, naval activities, and the quality of these marine chronometers in terms of a mechanical timekeeper has never been surpassed. Hamilton was so very detail-orientated. They developed alloys like Invar, El-Invar. These are alloys that have a very low reaction to change in temperature, and they so can be used then to create timekeepers that don't react very much at all to temperature change.
Wow.
And that's super important when you're talking about navigating at sea. This is a Hamilton 22, so it's sort of deck watch size chronometer. So you can see.
So the weight is really something.
Well, this one is a chronometer in its own right.
Right.
It's that good a timekeeper. The deck watch was always slightly, it was a good quality pocket watch, but these are top notch and very, very steady timekeepers. Really, you can't underplay the importance of the role that Hamilton played in the Second World War.
And an interesting thing, in our archives back there, we have the records of all of the Hamilton Model 21 marine chronometers and their time trials. So if somebody gets one, sends us the serial number, we can go back to the Hamilton records of how well it did in the trials.
Wow.
Hamilton Watch Company produced a variety of wristwatches for the military, including the iconic Hamilton Khaki Field Watch. The Khaki Field was introduced in 1940 and is known for its rugged construction and precise timekeeping. It featured a large, easy-to-read dial, luminescent hands and hour markers for visibility in low-light conditions, as well as a durable canvas strap. The watch was also water-resistant and shock-resistant, making it ideal for use in the field. Overall, Hamilton's wristwatches played an important role in World War II, helping soldiers and sailors keep accurate time in the midst of some of the most challenging conditions imaginable.
Over here, we have what Hamilton becomes known for, sort of in the middle of the 20th century, and that's Hamilton Electric.
Absolutely. They developed some extraordinary designs, and we have a whole host of examples here. We have the standard sort of watches that you'd find in the jewelry stores in maybe the 40s, 50s. And then over here we have a lot of the electronic watches. So where you've got electromagnetic balances, transistors, all coming together.
The Hamilton Electric made a huge impact on the industry when it was first released in 1957. We'll uncover that story with a major collector of Hamilton's history in a later episode.
Somehow we keep uncovering more and more fun things to do wherever we're going on this trip, and it seems that this time we have come at the exact same moment that there's the 130th anniversary celebration for Hamilton here in Lancaster. So we're outside a local jeweler here, Brent Miller. We're gonna go inside, talk to collectors, maybe handle some pieces, and see what the collecting culture here in Lancaster is all about. Hi again. That's the original Murph watch. So Houston, I hear you used to work at Hamilton, is this correct?
38 years, yeah.
You worked there for 38 years.
That's the original pulsar.
That's
the original pulsar.
The screen still works great.
Huh?
The screen still works great.
Yeah, it looks good. I dropped it right before I got here.
You dropped this?
In my shop when the ceramic heated tile and busted it. I got fixed. That's why I don't even know what time it is.
Inside the store was a literal party. Hamilton's own CEO was in town for the event. And what we found inside was a mix of collectors, enthusiasts, and industry veterans. You just can't be in the room with the CEO of Hamilton and not ask to have a sit-down conversation. Lucky for me, he brought a very cool watch with him that appealed to my sensibilities, the movie industry. I'm talking about the Hamilton Murph watch. So we sat down to chat about movies, about the history of the brand, and why we're here celebrating in Lancaster today.
As I was saying in the speech, and yes, it's a luck to see you here. I think we had kind of the same visit today within the NAWCC, the initial or the birthplace of Hamilton. The whole story with Hamilton started with the railroad. So we were the watch of the railroad accuracy. We were producing watches for the railroad, so we wanted to pay tribute to this past, to our history. So we have decided to launch this pocket watch. It's a limited edition, as you can see here. So it's an enamel-like dial, taking this Montgomery scale on the outside with black PVD hands, 45 millimeters with the unitas movement, so hand winding, of course. And on the back there is a very nice engraving on the face of the train. And this is a limited edition of 917 pieces. And why 917? Because you've been there today. The former location of Hamilton is located 917 Columbia Avenue.
Yes.
So that's why we wanted to create the link with our birthplace for this special year for Hamilton.
Multiple watches. I have my grandfather's old Hamilton.
Was this your dad's watch?
This is not my dad's watch, but my dad has two Venturas, and when I was going off to college, I buy watches for special occasions, and I ended up buying this a couple years ago.
I took over the responsibility of Hamilton in 2020, and I said at that time, the first things I'm going to do, I want to go to Lancaster. I'm working for Hamilton since more than 15 years, but I've never been in Lancaster. And I said, whenever you want to develop something, I'm taking the lead in a way of the brand, you need to know from where you come.
And there have been, continual upgrades to try to make it
wow. Look at this.
a little better.
That's
we've
great.
got a lot of this stuff.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I gotta get me one of those.
So this is the place.
Oh, wow. Wow.
My new friend Paul was not just here to give me a tour, but he's actually a resident of the building himself. And his apartment used to be part of the 4th floor of Hamilton's factory. In fact, his living room used to be the men's restroom. Go figure.
And in the floor, we can still see divots of where the pipes went through.
That is crazy.
In the concrete,
Yeah, I can see them, yeah.
Yeah, these brick were not exposed here and here. There was just a tiny opening here, but we just took the walls down, closed this in with this.
So you exposed this brick, and this brick's original to the building?
This is original to the building,
Wow.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's gorgeous old brick.
It really is.
It's just one hand in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. So here we go. This is the clock tower now. The first time I came up, I was just fascinated by this. And actually, I need to open a couple doors here. Now look at these. These arms go out. There's one here going to 4 different clocks that are 6 foot in diameter. But you can see the gears are running right here. Little bitty gears. Here's a clock. The interesting gears are on top, on the top shelf there. There's so much intricacy in that. Moving clock hands that are 6 feet and 4 of them, and all keeping time. It's pretty amazing.
It is really cool to see the legacy of Hamilton live on the way that it has with people like Paul, especially when you talk about the rich horological history that dates back to the 18th century. From the establishment of clock and watchmaking shops by German immigrants, to the rise of prominent companies like the Hamilton Watch Company, Lancaster has made significant contributions to the development of the watchmaking industry in the United States. I felt honored to see people like Roland at RGM and all the timepieces from collectors and contributors to the NAWCC keeping that legacy alive. Looking back on the history of Lancaster, we can appreciate the enduring legacy of the skilled craftspeople who laid the foundation for this industry, and the innovation and creativity that continue to shape it today. On the next episode of Watches in the Wild, The Road Through America, we take a look behind the scenes with Josh Shapiro in Los Angeles to look at a modern American watch company, to discover the legacy that remains for American watchmaking.